I stood in the biting March wind, watching the first shovelful of cold earth strike the polished wood of the casket. My son David was in that box. The sound, a dull thud, was the only one that mattered. The handful of people behind me shuffled their feet. 6 people, not 7 as I'd first counted. David's ex-girlfriend, Dr. Selena Hayes, had stepped up beside me, her hand hovering near my arm, unsure if I'd accept the comfort. The others remained scattered. David's best friend, Miles, his shoulders shaking. Our old neighbor, Mrs. Hemlock, clutching her purse. The pastor from St. Mark's Chapel, his book flapping in the wind, and 2 solemn funeral home employees. 6 people for a man who had coached Little League for free, who had done 2 tours for his country, who had a laugh that could light up a room. 20 miles away, my sister Samantha was clinking champagne glasses. Her daughter Emily was the guest of honor at an extravagant engagement party. An engagement party scheduled for the same day at the same time as my son's funeral. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, a cruel vibration against my ribs. I knew without looking. Another toast, another selfie, another congratulations for my niece. I pulled out the phone, my glove sticking to the cold glass. A new text message glowed on the screen. It was from Samantha. "Stop the drama. We need to talk urgently." I looked at the message, then at the hole in the ground. The second shovelful of dirt hit the casket. I turned the phone off and dropped it back into the abyss of my pocket. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The night before, I'd been standing in my kitchen, holding David's favorite coffee mug. World's best son. A gift from his last birthday, when we still thought the chemo might work. The phone felt unnaturally heavy in my other hand. "Gwen, you understand, don't you?" Samantha's voice was a high-pitched whine, dripping with false sympathy. "Understand what, Sam?" My voice was flat. I was addressing envelopes for the memorial service. "We can't cancel Emily's party. The country club is booked solid. All the deposits are non-refundable. We're talking thousands, Gwen. Thousands." I stared at the mug. David's fingerprints were probably still on it. "He's your nephew, Samantha. And Emily is my daughter. Life has to go on, Gwen. David, he wouldn't want us to stop living, would he? He was always so reasonable." I heard myself say the words before my brain caught up. Of course. Family comes first. The line went silent for a beat. Samantha hadn't expected it to be that easy. "Oh, well, good. I'm so glad you understand, Gwen. It's for the best. We'll visit the grave next week. Promise." I hung up without saying goodbye and hurled David's mug against the kitchen wall. It shattered into 100 pieces. World's best son was now just a pile of ceramic dust. Back at the graveside, the wind was getting colder. Mr. Price, the funeral director, a kind man who looked genuinely pained, leaned in close. "Mrs. Walton," he murmured, his eyes scanning the empty expanse of grass around us. "Would you like us to wait a few more minutes? Sometimes family runs late." I turned to look at him. His compassion was a physical thing, and it almost broke me. But oh, how wrong he was, I thought. They weren't late. They weren't stuck in traffic. They were exactly where they wanted to be, choosing canapes over condolences. "This is everyone, Mr. Price," I told him, my voice as steady and cold as the granite headstones surrounding us. "We can proceed." Selena Hayes finally took my arm, her grip firm. I let her. The house was suffocatingly silent. The sympathy casseroles on the counter remained untouched. I sat in David's armchair, the indentation where he always sat still visible in the cushion. When I turned my phone back on, it exploded. A digital avalanche of their excuses. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, not condolences, not apologies, excuses. Thomas, my brother. "Gwen, so sorry about today. Emma's party was just, well, you know how Sam gets. We'll visit the grave next week, promise." Catherine, my youngest sister. "Mom couldn't make it. The party was too much for her. But she sends her love." Emily. Auntie Gwen, so sorry you couldn't make it to the party. It was a blast. We missed you. I scrolled through the digital noise, my thumb numb. Then I found the one that mattered, the honest one, the one from Samantha sent an hour ago. Gwen, we need to discuss David's estate. Call me Monday. Estate, not inheritance, not final wishes. Estate. Like my son was a piece of property to be divided and sold. Like his death was an inconvenient line item on her budget. I walked to the kitchen, carefully stepping around the shattered remains of the coffee mug. I hadn't had the strength to clean it up. I opened the wine cabinet and pulled out a bottle of David's favorite red blend. We used to share it during our Sunday dinners, arguing over movies and politics. I poured a glass, the glug, glug, glug of the wine the only sound in the house. I held the glass up to the empty chair across from me. Well, David, I whispered, they want a transaction. I took a long sip. The wine tasted like ash. Fine. If my family wants to treat your death like a business transaction, then I'll give them exactly what they deserve. I sat down at the table, pulled out a notepad, and made a decision that would change everything. They would have to wait, but I would be ready. Monday morning, 7:30 a.m. The banging on my front door sounded like a siege. I opened it, coffee in hand, to find Samantha already vibrating with an impatient energy. She was dressed in a sharp business suit as if this was a hostile takeover, which I supposed it was. Gwen, good, you're up. She pushed past me into the foyer, not even waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. Did you make coffee? Hello, Samantha. Yes, I'm up. I was still in my bathrobe. I hadn't slept. She settled herself on my couch, crossing her legs and pulling a designer notebook from her oversized purse. She owned the place. I don't have time for coffee, actually. I have a 9 a.m. with the florist. We need to talk about David's trust fund. I just stared at her. He's been dead for 3 days, Sam. And that's tragic, truly, she said, waving her hand dismissively, her eyes already on her notes. But life goes on. Emily's wedding is in 6 months, and frankly, that money could make all the difference. I sat down in David's armchair, clutching my mug. What money, Samantha? The $300,000, Gwen. Don't play coy. She looked up, her eyes sharp. The venue alone costs $80,000, and that's before the flowers, the dress, the catering. Emily's been dreaming of this wedding since she was 12. How nice for Emily. My voice was ice. Tell me, did she enjoy the engagement party? I heard it was lovely. Samantha had the grace to look uncomfortable for exactly 2 seconds. Gwen, don't be like that. You know we wanted to be there for David, but sometimes life forces difficult choices. Difficult choices, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words, like choosing between burying your nephew and celebrating your daughter's engagement. That's not fair, and you know it. Her voice took on that high-pitched, whining quality I remembered from our childhood. The party was planned months ago. David would have understood. Would he? I snapped. Would David, who called you Aunt Selfish behind your back since he was 15, understand? David, who told me you only show up to family events when you need something? That David? Samantha recoiled, her face flushing. That's cruel, Gwen, and not true. She recovered quickly, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Besides, David named you as executor. Don't you see? He named you specifically because he trusted you to do what's best for the family. There it was, the real reason for the 7:30 a.m. ambush. She'd been up all night calculating. She wasn't just grieving a lost opportunity. She was planning an acquisition. He trusted you, Gwen, she repeated, to make sure we, the family, are taken care of. I took a slow sip of my coffee, buying time. Her greed was a physical thing, sucking the air out of the room. I had to play this perfectly. He left detailed instructions about the trust fund, Sam, I said carefully. Her eyes lit up. She leaned forward eagerly. Exactly. and I'm sure he'd want Emily to have the most beautiful wedding possible. She's the only grandchild left now, Gwen, the only one to carry on the family name. Only grandchild left. The words felt like a slap, as if David had never existed, as if his death was just an inconvenience that cleared the way for Emily's princess fantasy. The trust fund has specific stipulations, I continued, watching her face. David was very particular about how that money should be used. Well, what are they? She practically bounced on the couch. I'm sure we can work something out, maybe a loan against the inheritance. Emily's fiancé, Benjamin, has excellent credit. His family is very comfortable. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I needed to hide my expression. I wasn't just angry, I was disgusted. I poured my coffee down the drain and ran the tap, the sound of the water giving me a moment. The money is locked for 6 months, I called over my shoulder. I was lying, but it was a good lie. Standard probate procedures. 6 months? Her voice cracked. She was in the kitchen doorway in a second. But the wedding is in 6 months. Gwen, you have to do something. Can't you petition the court? Speed things up? I returned with a glass of water and sat back down, studying her. Her highlights needed touching up. There were lines of desperation around her eyes. Why is Emily's wedding so urgent, Sam? Can't they wait a year or two? Her face went through several shades of red. Well, they're very much in love. Young love can't wait. You know how romantic and expensive, apparently. Gwen, please. The crocodile tears welled up. This wedding means everything to Emily, and to me, after everything I've been through with the divorce, seeing my daughter happy. Her divorce, the one that was entirely her fault for cheating on her husband with his business partner. But in Samantha's world, she was always the victim. I let the silence stretch. Finally, I sighed, as if considering it. I'll consider it, Sam, I lied smoothly. Let me review David's exact wishes and see what options we have. She brightened immediately. Really? Oh, Gwen, thank you. Emma will be so thrilled. I knew we could count on you. As I walked her to the door, she turned back, a sly look on her face. Oh, and Gwen? Maybe don't mention this conversation to the rest of the family yet. You know how they get about money discussions. Translation: don't tell Thomas and Catherine about the $300K until I figure out how to claim it all for myself. I forced a tight smile. Of course not, Sam. It'll be our secret. The moment her car pulled away from the curb, I went back inside and picked up my phone. I knew exactly who I was calling first. That afternoon, I drove to Eternal Meadows Gardens. David rested in a quiet plot under a large oak tree, a spot I'd chosen myself. The permanent headstone wouldn't be ready for a month, but I'd placed fresh flowers and a small American flag by the temporary marker. David had served 2 tours before the cancer diagnosis. He'd been a fighter to the very end. I unfolded the small camp chair I'd brought and sat down. Well, sweetheart, I said, the words feeling strange in the open air. Your Aunt Samantha visited today. The wind rustled through the oak leaves, and I could almost hear David's laugh. He'd had the most wonderful laugh, deep and infectious. She sends her love, I continued, and her invoices. She wants your trust fund for Emily's wedding. Can you believe that? Your cousin, who couldn't be bothered to send a sympathy card, wants to wear a $15,000 dress bought with your money. I sat there for a long time, just talking to him, telling him about the funeral, about Selena and Miles, about how Mrs. Hemlock had brought over a terrible tuna casserole. It felt good to talk. After a while, I reached into my bag and pulled out the large manila folder I'd brought from home. Inside were David's will, the trust documents, and a thick, sealed envelope. A letter he'd written to me during his last week, when he was still lucid. He'd made me promise not to open it until after. I broke the seal. His handwriting, once so strong, was careful and a little shaky. Mom, it began, if you're reading this, then the cancer won. I'm sorry for leaving you alone to deal with our family. I know how they are, especially Samantha." My breath hitched. He'd known. Of course he'd known. "I've set up the trust fund with very specific instructions because I know she'll come sniffing around the money before my body's even cold." A tear dripped onto the page. He'd been too smart for his own good. "The $300,000 is meant for education and medical expenses for underprivileged children. I've already contacted the Children's Hospital Foundation and set up the framework. Samantha will probably try to convince you that I'd want Emily to have it for her wedding. Don't believe her. I wouldn't give Samantha $1 to save her life, let alone $300K for her daughter's princess party." I laughed through my tears. Even from the grave, he was still protecting me. "There's one more thing, Mom. I've given you full discretionary power over how and when the money is distributed. If our family gives you any grief about my final wishes, feel free to remind them that kindness during life earns consideration after death. They made their choices. Now they can live with the consequences." It was signed, "Love always, your son who knew better." He hadn't just left me money to manage. He had left me a shield, a sword, and permission to finally stand up to the family that had treated us both as afterthoughts for years. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the folder just as my phone buzzed. This time, it was a text from Emily. "Emily, Aunt Gwen, Mom told me the amazing news about Uncle David's gift for my wedding. I'm crying. It's so generous. Emily, can we go dress shopping together this weekend? I want to show you the one I've been dreaming about." The one she'd been dreaming about. While I was dreaming about my son coming home from his last chemotherapy session, whole and healthy, I typed back, my thumb pressing hard on the screen. "Gwen, we'll talk soon, sweetie." A reply came back immediately. "Emily, OMG, yes, I can't wait. This is going to be the most perfect wedding ever. Uncle David would be so happy to see us celebrating life instead of being sad." Celebrating life. Is that what we were calling it? I stood up, brushing the grass from my coat, and placed my hand on the temporary marker. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I whispered to the cold ground. "I understand the assignment. Samantha wants to play games with your memory. Well, she picked the wrong woman to mess with. Your mother didn't raise any fools." On the drive home, I made a mental list. First, David's lawyer, Stella Mercer. She'd helped him set up the trust and would know how to protect it. Second, the financial advisor who managed the account. Third, the director of the Children's Hospital Foundation, who was expecting David's donation. And then, just for fun, I was going to call my other siblings. I called my brother, Thomas, first. "Tom, hi, it's Gwen." "Gwen, I was just thinking about you. Listen, about the funeral." "Tom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to keep it between us," I said, using the same conspiratorial tone Samantha had used on me. "Oh? Yeah, of course. What's up?" "Samantha came to see me this morning. She asked me to petition the court to release David's $300,000 trust fund so she could use it all for Emily's wedding." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. What, all of it?" "All of it. She even told me not to tell you or Catherine. Said you'd get funny about money. I feel terrible keeping a secret like that from you." That snake," he sputtered. "She told me she was just going to ask you for a small loan." "Well, she lied," I said simply. "Anyway, I have to go. Just thought you should know." I hung up and immediately dialed my sister Catherine. I had the exact same conversation. Her reaction was even more explosive. What? After I lent her $5,000 last month for the caterer deposit? That witch. She told me she was broke." "I'm just so worried, Catherine," I said, laying it on thick. "She seems desperate." "Oh, she's desperate all right, Gwen. Don't you worry. I'm going to handle this." I hung up and smiled. Samantha had wanted me not to tell the family. Good thing I'd never been particularly obedient. I'd just lit 2 fires. Now I'd sit back and watch them converge on Samantha's perfectly planned life. I spent the next morning with Stella Mercer. She was sharp, no nonsense, and had clearly adored David. "This is ironclad, Gwen," she said, tapping the original will and David's handwritten letter, which I'd brought in the manila folder. "The will establishes the trust. This letter," she held it up, "is his contemplation of death addendum. It gives you, the executor, crystal clear direction and discretionary power. It's beautiful." She made certified copies of everything. "Keep the originals in a safe," she advised. "A very, very safe. But these copies are legally binding. We're in a good position." I left her office feeling lighter than I had in months. I had David's wishes and I had the law on my side. I got home that afternoon. The mail was still in the slot. The house was quiet. But something was wrong. It was a feeling, a cold prickle on my neck. I walked into the living room. The cushions on the couch were slightly askew, but I'd been sitting there. I went to the kitchen. A coffee cup was in the sink, but I'd left it there. "You're being paranoid, Gwen," I muttered. Then I went to my home office. My desk, the top drawer where I'd put the manila folder from Stella's office, was closed. I'd left it open an inch. I was sure of it. My heart hammered. I pulled the drawer open. The manila folder was still there. I let out a breath. I opened it. The certified copies of the will, the trust documents, the financial statements. But the letter, David's original, handwritten, 6-page letter. It was gone. I tore the office apart. I dumped the folder, shaking every page. I checked the drawer, the floor, my bag. Gone. Someone had been in my house. Someone had known exactly what to look for. They'd left the copies. They'd left the will. They had only taken the one thing that proved David's state of mind, the one thing that gave me permission to fight. "Samantha," I whispered, the name tasting like poison. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial. "Stella Mercer's office." "It's Gwen Walton. I need Stella. It's an emergency." She was on the line in 10 seconds. "Gwen, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "They took it," I choked out. "Someone broke into my house. They took the letter, David's letter." "What, the original?" Her voice went sharp. "Gwen, tell me exactly what's missing." "Just the letter, the handwritten one. All the copies you made are still here. The will is here. Just the letter is gone." There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line. Stella, you said the copies were binding. It's okay, right? We have the copies." "Gwen," she said, and my stomach dropped. Her voice was grim. "The copies of the will are binding. The copies of the trust are binding. A copy of a handwritten, unnotarized addendum letter, that's a different story." What do you mean?" "I mean, Roman Blackwood, if that's who Samantha hires, will argue it's a fabrication. He'll say a grief-stricken mother typed up what she wanted her son to say and signed his name. Without the original, with his real, frail handwriting, it's just a piece of paper. It's your word against theirs." The room started to spin. So what does that mean?" "It means," Stella said, her voice hard as nails, "that our fight just got 10 times harder. They didn't just steal a letter, Gwen. They stole our smoking gun." Tuesday evening, my doorbell rang. It was Thomas and Catherine. They didn't look like they were there to offer condolences. They looked like a lynch mob. They stormed past me into the living room. "Gwen," Thomas began, his car salesman voice in full effect, radiating false sincerity. "We need to talk about this situation with David's money." "What situation?" I crossed my arms, my heart still hammering from my call with Stella. "Don't play dumb," Catherine snapped. She'd clearly been pre-gaming with her anger. "Samantha called us, crying, said you offered her money for the wedding and then snatched it away to be cruel." I laughed. A short, bitter bark. "She what?" "She came here Monday morning, 3 days after David died, and demanded the entire $300,000. She lied to both of you, tried to cut you out." Thomas and Catherine exchanged a glance. They'd rehearsed this. "Now, Gwen," Thomas said, taking on a placating tone, "Sam was emotional. We're all emotional. We think, as a family, it would be wise to distribute those assets, sooner rather than later, for tax purposes, of course." "Tax purposes," I repeated. "How creative." "It's about fairness," Catherine cut in, leaning forward. "David wouldn't want to play favorites. That money should be divided among all the grandchildren." "All the grandchildren?" I raised an eyebrow. "Tom, your kids are in their 30s with stock portfolios. Catherine, yours are in their 20s with good jobs. Emily is the only one getting married." "That's not the point," Catherine protested. "It's the principle." "The principle," I said, "is that it's David's money, not yours, not mine." Thomas stepped closer, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone he'd used on me since I was a child. "Look, Gwen, we know you're grieving, and you're not getting any younger. Managing a large sum of money like that, it can be stressful." He patted my arm. "We could help. We could take that burden right off your hands." The burden of honoring my son's final wishes. That's when I snapped. I slapped his hand away. "Burden? You want to talk about burdens, Tom?" I stalked over to the mantel, to the framed photo of David in his uniform. Next to it sat his Purple Heart in its dark blue case. "You want to talk about difficult choices?" I spun around, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't even known was there. "Difficult choices are deciding whether to take your son off life support. Difficult choices are choosing a casket for someone who should have outlived you by 50 years. Difficult choices are sitting alone at a funeral. Because your family," I spat the word, "chose champagne and shrimp puffs over compassion." The room was dead silent. Thomas was studying his shoes. Catherine suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. I wasn't finished. I advanced on them. "Now you want to make another difficult choice about my son's money, the money he specifically designated for charity work with sick children, the money he trusted me to distribute." Tom's head snapped up. "What? What charity?" Catherine's face twisted. "You're lying." "Am I?" I jabbed a finger at my desk. "The will is right there. He left explicit instructions. Not one penny was intended for weddings or vacations or to pay off your credit cards." Tom looked stunned. She lied. Samantha lied. She told us he left it all to the family." Catherine, however, recovered faster. Her greed was more potent than her shock. She stood up abruptly. "Fine," she hissed. "Be selfish. Be a martyr. Keep it all for yourself and your charity. But don't come crying to us when you're old and alone and need care, because we won't be there." The threat was so predictable, I almost laughed. "Catherine, sweetie," I said, my voice dripping with mock sweetness, "when have any of you ever supported me? When David was dying, did you visit? When I was handling funeral arrangements alone, did you offer to help? When I was grieving, did you even call to check on me?" She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "The answer is no, to all of it. So your threats about future abandonment ring a bit hollow, considering you've already mastered the art of absence." They left without another word, slamming the front door behind them. I sank into David's chair, my body trembling. The war had officially begun, and thanks to Samantha, I was now fighting it unarmed. The next day, my doorbell rang again. I almost didn't answer it. I was expecting more vultures. Instead, it was Emily, alone. She looked small and lost, her eyes red-rimmed, clutching a Starbucks cup like a life raft. "Aunt Gwen?" Her voice was a tiny whisper. Can we talk?" I let her in. She perched nervously on the edge of the couch, avoiding eye contact. Emily had always been Samantha's show pony, pretty, popular, and perfectly willing to let her mother orchestrate her entire life. Today, she just looked broken. "Mom told me about the trust fund," she began, then stopped, pressing her lips together. She said Uncle David wanted to help with my wedding. I just waited. I settled into my chair, studying her. She said you were being difficult about releasing the money, that you didn't understand how important this wedding is to our family. I let the silence stretch. Years of raising David had taught me that young people often revealed more when you didn't rush to fill the quiet spaces. Finally, she looked up, her eyes flooding. "But it doesn't make sense," she burst out. "Uncle David never even met Benjamin. I mean, they talked once at Christmas on a video call, and Uncle David seemed, I don't know, not impressed. That was putting it mildly. David had privately called Benjamin a trust fund baby with the personality of wet cardboard. I, however, kept that observation to myself. "Tell me about Benjamin," I said instead. Her face lit up, but it was a practiced, rehearsed brightness. "Oh, he's wonderful, Aunt Gwen. His family owns 3 country clubs, and he went to Princeton, and he's so handsome. Mom says I'm lucky to catch someone from such a good family." "And what do you say?" The question seemed to throw her. What do you mean?" "I mean, what do you think about Benjamin? Not what your mother thinks, not what his family owns. What do you think?" Emily stared into her coffee cup. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I think I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of everything." The words tumbled out in a rush. The wedding, the marriage, the pressure to be perfect. Mom's been planning this since the day I got engaged, and it's just gotten so big and expensive and complicated. Benjamin's mother keeps adding people to the guest list, and Mom keeps adding things to compete with her. And nobody asked me what I wanted. "What do you want, Emily?" Her voice broke completely. "I wanted a small ceremony, maybe at the beach, just family and close friends. I wanted to write my own vows. I wanted Uncle David to walk me down the aisle since Grandpa's gone." She dissolved into sobs. "But now Uncle David's gone too. And Mom says we can't have the wedding I wanted because Benjamin's family would think we're cheap." I handed her the box of tissues. "Emily, sweetie, whose wedding is this?" "Mine," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "But Mom's paying for it. Or she was, until she found out about Uncle David's money. Now she says this is my chance to have the wedding of my dreams. But it's not my dream, Aunt Gwen. It's hers." There it was. The truth Samantha would never admit. This wedding wasn't about Emily. It was about Samantha's status, her chance to compete, her opportunity to prove she belonged. "Emma," I said softly, "can I ask you something personal?" She nodded. "Do you love Benjamin?" Another long pause. I love the idea of him. I love that he makes me feel safe. I love that he chose me. But she twisted the massive diamond on her finger. Sometimes I wonder if he'd even notice if I were replaced by someone else who looked similar and agreed with everything he said. My heart broke for her, raised to be an accessory. "Emily," I said, making a decision. "Your Uncle David left you something in his will, not money, advice." I didn't have the letter, but I had a damn good memory. "He wrote a letter," I said, "before he passed. He said, if Emily is reading this, I hope she remembers that she's smart enough to make her own choices and strong enough to stand by them. Don't let anyone else write the story of your life, especially not your mother." She started crying again, but these were different tears. He said that?" "He did. He also said that if you ever needed someone to talk to about difficult family situations, you should call his friend, Dr. Selena Hayes. She's a therapist who specializes in helping young women navigate family pressure." I wrote down Selena's number and handed it to her. "Think about what you want, sweetie, not what your mother wants, not what Benjamin's family expects. What would make you truly happy?" She hugged me. A real tight hug. "Thank you, Aunt Gwen. For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe. After she left, I called Selena and gave her a heads up. Samantha wanted to use David's memory to fund her ambitions. Well, David was about to reach back from the grave and mess with her plans in a way she never saw coming. Friday. My phone rang, and I knew from the angry buzzing it was her. Gwen Walton. Grace, we need to meet. Today. Samantha's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. Cafe Laurel. 1 hour. What's this about, Sam? It's about you. Emily's been asking questions about the wedding, about Benjamin. Frankly, your influence isn't helpful. My influence? You mean encouraging her to think for herself? I mean filling her head with doubts. She came home crying yesterday, talking nonsense about postponing. Do you have any idea what that would cost us? Cost them. Not cost Emily's happiness. Cost them money and social standing. Cafe Laurel, 1 hour, I said. This is going to be delicious. I arrived first and chose a table in the exact center of the dining room. Public. Loud. She'd have to control her voice. She'd always underestimated me. She stormed in 10 minutes later, her face a thundercloud. She didn't even sit down before she started. Let's get straight to the point. What did you tell Emily? I told her the truth about David's will. I signaled the waitress. Coffee, black? Something you apparently forgot to mention. What truth? She hissed, finally sliding into the chair. That David never intended his money to fund her wedding, that he specifically designated it for charity, for sick children, that you lied to your entire family about his final wishes. The waitress appeared, and Samantha was forced to smile and order a latte. The moment she was gone, the mask dropped. Grace, I don't think you understand the situation here. She leaned in, her voice low and menacing. Emily's engagement to Benjamin is the best thing that could happen to this family. This family? Or you? His father owns half the commercial real estate in the county. His connections could help all of us. Help you. All of us, she repeated firmly. Tom's dealership is struggling. Catherine's kids need college funds. And you, well, you're alone now, Gwen. When you're older and need care, connections like the Ashford family could make all the difference. The Ashford family, so that was their name. And all it costs, I said, sipping my coffee, is betraying my son's final wishes. What a bargain. Samantha's mask finally slipped completely. Your son is dead, Gwen. She spat the word. Nothing you do with that money will bring him back. But Emily is alive, and this wedding could secure her future. Why can't you see that? Because Emily doesn't want this wedding. The words hung between us, a challenge. She wants something small, not a 3-ring circus designed to impress people who don't care about her happiness. Emma wants what's best for her, even if she's too young to understand it. The Ashfords don't marry down, Gwen. This is her one chance, and I will not let your grief ruin it. My grief? I set my cup down with a sharp click. Tell me, Sam, what do you know about my grief? When did you last ask how I was? When did you call to check if I needed anything? When did you show even the slightest interest in my well-being after I lost my only child? The party. The answer is never. I cut her off. You've shown more concern about David's money in the past week than you showed about David during his entire illness. You couldn't even be bothered to attend his funeral, but you want to steal his legacy to throw a party. I'm not stealing anything. Family money should benefit the family. Then you should be thrilled, I said, my voice bright and hard. David's money will benefit hundreds of families. Families with sick children, just like he intended. Her eyes narrowed. You're really going to give $300,000 to strangers instead of your own niece. I'm going to honor my son's wishes instead of funding your social ambitions. If you want a $100,000 wedding for Emily, you figure out how to pay for it yourself. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly. Diners turned to look. This isn't over, Gwen. Her voice was a low snarl. "Emma is my daughter, and I will not let you poison her. There are legal ways to challenge a will, especially when the executor isn't acting in the family's best interests, when she's unstable." "Try it," I said calmly, meeting her gaze. "I would love to explain to a judge why David's aunt thinks she deserves his money more than the sick children he wanted to help." She stormed out, but her threat lingered. She was going to lawyer up. Good, I already had. Monday morning, I was back in Stella Mercer's office. The news was not good. "Gwen, I need you to understand what we're up against." Stella spread papers across her desk. "Samantha hired Richard Blackwood." The name meant nothing to me. Stella's grim expression told me it should. Should I be worried? Blackwood specializes in contesting wills. He's expensive, he's ruthless, and he's very, very good at what he does. He's already filed a preliminary motion. She slid a document across the desk. I read the header. "Petition to remove executor." "He's claiming you're not competent to execute David's wishes due to grief-induced mental distress." I laughed. I actually laughed. Mental distress for honoring my son's will? "Blackwood's argument," Stella continued, "is that no rational person would give $300,000 to strangers while family members have legitimate financial needs. He'll paint you as a grieving, irrational mother. And Emily's wedding dress is a legitimate financial need? That's exactly what we'll ask the judge. But Gwen, there's more. He has requested a full court-appointed psychological evaluation." The audacity took my breath away. She's trying to have me declared mentally unfit because I won't pay for a party. They can request it. Whether the judge grants it depends on our case. The good news is David's will is ironclad. 2 witnesses, a notary, mentally competent. The bad news: without that letter, our proof of his specific charitable intent is weak. It's the will versus Samantha's testimony that David loved his family and wanted to provide for them. "She stole the letter," I said flatly. "I know she did. And we can't prove it, which is why this will get ugly. Samantha's already given statements to Blackwood's investigators about your erratic behavior." "What erratic behavior?" "According to her, you've become withdrawn, paranoid, and hostile toward family members who are only trying to help. She's claiming you've isolated yourself and are making irrational financial decisions, like refusing to fund a $100,000 wedding for a niece whose fiancé David actively disliked." "Exactly like that," Stella said, "but Blackwood will spin it. Now, I'm scheduling a meeting with Dr. Penelope Monroe. She's the best geriatric psychiatrist in the state. If they want a competency evaluation, we're going to beat them to the punch with our own expert witness." I left her office feeling battered. My phone buzzed as I got to my car. A text from Emily. "Emily, Aunt Gwen, Mom hired a lawyer. She says you're sick and need help. Is that true?" I typed back, my hands steady. "Gwen, I'm fine, sweetie. Just protecting Uncle David's wishes like he asked me to." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Emily, can I come see you this weekend? I need to tell you something important." "Gwen, of course, Saturday afternoon." "Emily, yes, and Aunt Gwen, I think I know why Mom's so desperate for this money. It's not just about the wedding." I stared at that last message for a long time. What other secrets was my family keeping? That night, long after midnight, my phone rang. A blocked number. I almost didn't answer. I finally did, my voice wary. "Hello? Gwen." The voice was a harsh whisper. "Don't talk, just listen." My blood went cold. "Catherine, shut up, I said listen." There was a sound of a car door closing. Then the whisper was back, more urgent. "You were right. About everything. Samantha is a black hole. She's not just greedy, Gwen. She's desperate." "Catherine, what are you talking about?" "I co-signed a business loan for her last year. A small one, she said. 10,000. She defaulted. What? She defaulted, Gwen. It hit my credit. I'm trying to refinance my house, and the bank laughed at me. I'm ruined because of her. Her voice was thick with a rage that matched my own. This wasn't an apology. This was a confession of self-interest. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm on your side now. Not because I'm nice. Not because I give a damn about David's sick kids. I'm on your side because she needs to be stopped. She's dragging us all down with her. So what do you want from me? I asked. Nothing, I'm telling you. I'm going to give you something. She has a stack of letters, collection agencies, second mortgage notices. I've seen them in her desk. I can get them. And give them to me? Catherine, that's her private mail. Don't be an idiot, Gwen, she snapped. I'm not giving them to you. You're the executor. But Emily is the key. I'm going to get those papers and I'm going to give them to Emily. I'll tell her she needs to find them and show them to you. Are we clear? My mind was reeling. Catherine was setting Samantha up. Using Emily. Using me. Are we clear, Gwen? Crystal, I said. The line clicked dead. I had an ally. An unexpected, unwilling, and wonderfully selfish ally. On Saturday, Emily arrived exactly on time. She looked even worse than the last time. She was clutching a large manila envelope as if it were a bomb. Aunt Gwen, she said, her voice shaking. She sat on the couch, her hands twisting in her lap. Emily, what is it? I asked, playing my part. I was looking for my birth certificate, for the marriage license. I was in Mom's desk and I found these. She handed me the envelope. It was thick. Emma, sweetie, I said, feigning reluctance. I don't think I should be looking at your mother's private... Just look. I opened the clasp and pulled out a stack of papers. Credit card statements, Masteries, Visa, American Express, all in Samantha's name, all maxed out. She owes $80,000 in credit card debt, Emily said, her voice dead. I kept reading. A notice of default on a second mortgage, a final warning from a collection agency, a notice that her car was scheduled for repossession. Samantha wasn't just greedy, she was drowning. She wasn't trying to fund a wedding, she was trying to plug a hole in a sinking ship. David's $300,000 wasn't a wedding gift, it was a life raft. There's more, Emily said, pulling out another set of papers. These are from the wedding planner. I scanned the invoices, the $80,000 venue, the $15,000 florist, the $10,000 caterer, and at the bottom of each, client contribution, $0, pending contribution from Ashford family, $0. Benjamin's family isn't paying for anything, Emily whispered. His mother told Mom that the bride's family traditionally handles all wedding expenses. Mom's been lying about their contribution. She's been lying about everything. The pieces clicked into place. Samantha had promised a fairy tale, assuming she could charm, bully, or steal the money from me. And when that failed, she'd turn to legal intimidation. Emily, I asked gently, does Benjamin know about your mother's financial situation? I don't think so. His family is very traditional. They believe in proper social standing, financial stability. If they knew Mom was broke, they might question whether I'm suitable. And how would you feel about that? She was quiet for a long time. Relieved, she finally whispered. Maybe. Aunt Gwen, she continued, taking a deep breath. I've been thinking about what you said, and I called Dr. Hayes. Oh? How did that go? She's amazing. She helped me realize that I've been planning my mother's dream wedding, not mine, and that maybe I'm marrying Benjamin for the same reason, because it's what Mom wants, not because it's what I want. I set the financial documents aside. What would make you happy, Emily? I want to postpone the wedding, she said, the words gaining strength. I want to take time to figure out if Benjamin and I are really compatible or if we're just going through the motions because it looks good on paper. Tears started to flow again. But if I postpone, Mom will lose all the deposits, money she doesn't have. She'll be ruined. Sweetie, I said gently, your mother's financial problems are not your responsibility. But she's my mom. I can't just let her drown. The loyalty was admirable, even if it was horribly misplaced. Emily, I said, what if there was a way to help your mother, without sacrificing Uncle David's charitable goals? She looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. What do you mean? What if David's foundation hired your mother as a fundraising coordinator? It would be legitimate work, a real salary. It would give her a chance to rebuild her finances, honestly. I knew the answer. Samantha's pride would never allow her to accept charity in the form of a job, especially not one from me. But the offer had to be made. You'd do that? David believed in second chances, I said. We can offer. Emily left with a plan, a terrifying, brave plan, to talk to Benjamin about postponing and to talk to Samantha about her debt. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. That evening, my phone rang. Samantha's name flashed on the screen. I put it on speaker. How dare you? The scream was so loud I flinched. How dare you poison my daughter against her own wedding? Hello, Samantha. Emily made her own decision. She's confused. She's grieving. She needs guidance. Not some therapist filling her head with nonsense about independence. She needs to marry Benjamin. She needs to marry someone she loves, Samantha, not someone who improves your social status. You have no idea what you're talking about, she snarled. Emma's wedding is her chance, a chance at a better life. Benjamin's family has connections, money, influence, things that matter in the real world. Does Benjamin know you're broke? The silence on the other end was so complete, I thought she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was dangerously quiet. I don't know what Emily told you, but my financial situation is temporary. The wedding will solve everything. By bankrupting David's charity or by securing Emily's future, something you apparently care nothing about. The call ended abruptly. But I knew this was far from over. A cornered animal is the most dangerous, and Samantha had just been backed into a corner. Tuesday morning, my doorbell, again. This time it was Thomas and Catherine, but their expressions weren't hostile. They were scared. Gwen, we need to talk, Thomas said. His usual salesman swagger was gone. He just looked tired. About Samantha. I let them in. They sat on the couch, looking like children called to the principal's office. We had coffee with Susan yesterday, Catherine began. She's not well, Gwen, financially or emotionally. Emily told me about the debt, I said. Tom nodded grimly. It's worse than you think. She doesn't just owe the banks. She owes money to people who don't accept payment plans. The kind of people who make house calls when you're late. That was new. How bad is it? Bad enough that she borrowed $15,000 from me last month, Tom said. Money I needed for my own dealership, and she asked Catherine for another $10,000 yesterday. So she was borrowing from family she couldn't repay to pay off people she was terrified of. We came to apologize, Gwen, Thomas continued, looking me in the eye, and to ask for your help. My help? Not with money, Catherine said quickly. With her, she's obsessed with this wedding, with getting David's trust fund. She's talking about hiring private investigators to dig up dirt on you, about proving you influenced David when he was sick. She's already hired Roman Blackwood. We know, and we think she's making a terrible mistake. Tom leaned forward. Gwen, we were wrong, dead wrong, about the trust fund. David's money should go where David wanted it to go. I raised an eyebrow. This was a stunning reversal. But she's going to destroy herself fighting you, Carol pleaded. She can't afford Blackwood's fees, and if she loses, she'll owe him money on top of everything else. Talk to her. Make her understand. And if I refuse? Then, Tom said, she'll probably lose her house, her car, and her relationship with Emily, and Emily will blame herself for all of it. The manipulation was subtler this time, but it was still manipulation. They weren't asking me to give up David's money. They were asking me to save Samantha from the consequences of her own choices. I'll think about it, I said. As they left, Catherine brushed past me, accidentally bumping my arm. "So sorry, Gwen," she murmured. Her hand had been in her coat pocket. My hand was now in mine. I felt a small folded piece of paper. I waited until their car was gone. I unfolded the note. Catherine's handwriting. "Thomas is lying. He's not sorry. He's scared. Samantha borrowed from a loan shark. He's afraid they'll come for him next. Trust no one." I called Stella and told her about the loan shark, about the private investigators. She told me to lock my doors and be prepared. That evening, Emily called. She sounded exhausted. "I did it," she whispered. "I told him." "Told him what, sweetie?" "Benjamin. I told him I wanted to postpone the wedding, to slow down, to figure things out." "How did he take it?" A long, heavy sigh. "Not well. He thinks I'm having pre-wedding jitters. He told me I should trust his judgment about what's best for our future." "He didn't listen to you." "He didn't listen to a single word I said," she said, her voice breaking. "He just kept talking about how disappointed his parents would be, about the deposits, about how much money we'd lose." "Sounds familiar." "Exactly, like Mom." Her voice was dead. "Aunt Gwen, I think I've been engaged to a male version of my mother." "That's progress, sweetie," I said. "Now what are you going to do?" I need to think." Thursday morning. My world was tilting and I couldn't find my balance. The legal battle, the family betrayal, the loan sharks. Then the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. A woman I'd never seen before, mid-30s, professional, carrying a briefcase, not a private investigator, not a loan shark. I opened the door on the chain. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Walton? Gwen Walton?" "Yes." "My name is Jessica Malone. I'm an investigative journalist with the Telegraph." She held up a press badge. "I'd like to ask you some questions about the Ashford family." The name hit me. Benjamin's family. "Why would a journalist be interested in them?" I said, unhooking the chain. "I'm not sure you can help me," I said, letting her in. "I don't know them well." "You're Gwen Walton, correct?" "Your sister is Samantha Walton?" "Yes." "And your niece, Emily, is engaged to Benjamin Ashford, Jr.? Yes, she is." "Mrs. Walton," she said, her eyes sharp and serious, "I'm working on a story about charity fraud and tax evasion. The Ashford Foundation, it's been under federal investigation for the past 6 months." My blood ran cold. I sank into David's chair. What kind of investigation?" Jessica Malone sat opposite me, all business. "They've been claiming millions in tax deductions for charitable donations, donations that never reach the intended recipients. We're talking about a massive, multi-year fraud operation." She pulled out a tablet. "The foundation's director is Benjamin Ashford, Sr. His son, Benjamin Jr., your niece's fiancé, is listed as the assistant director. Both are facing potential federal charges." My God, does Emily know? I doubt it. The investigation has been kept quiet, but Mrs. Walton, there's more. She leaned forward. "The Ashford family has a pattern. They've been targeting wealthy widows, families with substantial inheritances. They arrange marriages or partnerships, then gradually gain access to the money for their fraudulent operations." You think Benjamin is deliberately targeting Emily?" "I think," Jessica said carefully, "that Benjamin's family identified your niece as someone with potential access to significant funds. The timing of their engagement, right after your son's diagnosis became public knowledge, is suspicious." I thought about Emily's whirlwind romance, how he'd swept her off her feet, how he'd proposed after only 4 months, how his family had insisted on an expensive wedding. "What do you need from me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Information about the trust fund. How much money? Who has access? What safeguards are in place? If the Ashfords are planning to defraud your family, we need to document their methods." I told her everything. The $300,000, Samantha's lawsuit, Blackwood's competency challenge, the stolen letter. Jessica Malone's expression grew more and more concerned. She took notes rapidly. "Mrs. Walton," she said, looking up from her tablet, "your sister's lawsuit. It might actually be helping them. If she succeeds in getting the money distributed to family members, it becomes much easier for them to access through marriage. It's no longer in a protected trust. It's in Emily's bank account." "But Emily's having doubts. She's postponing the wedding." "Then she needs to know the truth. Immediately." Jessica's face was grim. "Mrs. Walton, I'm not trying to scare you, but you need to understand. If Emily marries Benjamin Ashford, even if she knows nothing, she could be charged as an accessory to federal fraud. My son's legacy, my niece's future." All of it was on the line. I grabbed my phone. "Emily, sweetie, I need you to come over, right now." I can't, Aunt Gwen. Benjamin's taking me to meet with the caterer. Then we have dinner with his parents. Can it wait?" "No," I said, my voice iron. "Emma, this is urgent. Cancel your plans. Get in your car and come here now." Something in my voice must have convinced her. Okay, I'll be there in an hour." When Emily arrived, I introduced her to Jessica. I watched my niece's face go from confusion to disbelief to chalk-white horror as the journalist explained the federal investigation. That's impossible," Emily whispered. "The Ashfords they're respected philanthropists. They've donated millions." "They've claimed to donate millions," Jessica corrected gently. "The money was funneled into offshore accounts. Benjamin, he wouldn't. He's not like that." "Emily," I said, "how much does Benjamin know about David's trust fund?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrible understanding. "Everything. I told him all about it, after Mom explained how Uncle David wanted to help with our wedding." Jessica and I exchanged a look. "What exactly did you tell him?" I asked. "About the $300,000, she said, her voice getting smaller. "About how you were the executor. About Mom's lawsuit to get the money distributed to family members." "Oh, God," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "He asked so many questions about the legal process, about how long it would take, about whether the money could be accessed before the wedding." "Emily," Jessica said carefully, "I need to ask. Has Benjamin or his family suggested any changes to your financial arrangements? Joint bank accounts? Power of attorney?" Emily started to cry, silent, horrified tears. "His mother, last week, she suggested I set up a joint investment account with Benjamin. Before the wedding. She said it would show the banks we were serious about building a life together. She even gave me the name of a specific financial advisor to use." "That advisor," Jessica said, "is probably part of their operation. Once you had joint accounts, Benjamin would have access to any money you received, from the trust, from your mother, anything." "I need to call this off," Emily said, her voice suddenly strong. She stood up, wiping her eyes. "The wedding, the engagement, everything. I need to get away from them." "Carefully," Jessica warned. "If the Ashfords realize you know about the investigation, they might escalate their timeline. Can you act normal for just a few more days while we coordinate with the federal agents I'm in contact with?" Emily nodded, her face set. "Yes, I can." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a new, terrible clarity. What about Mom's lawsuit? Her lawyer, Blackwood, he's still trying to have you declared incompetent." I suddenly started to laugh. A real, genuine laugh. They both stared at me. "Aunt Gwen?" "Oh, sweetie," I said. "Your mother's lawsuit? That just became our greatest weapon. It's a blessing in disguise." "What are you talking about?" "Don't you see?" I explained. "As long as that lawsuit is active, the trust is frozen. Samantha's legal challenge, the one she started to get the money, is the one thing preventing the Ashfords from touching a penny of it. My grief-induced mental distress is the best defense that money ever had." "So," Emily whispered, "Uncle David, he protected us, even from beyond the grave." "Your uncle," I said, "was always smarter than the rest of us gave him credit for." 2 weeks later, I sat in the cold, wood-paneled courtroom of Judge Harlow. I'd met with Dr. Sal Monroe, who had declared me remarkably resilient and perfectly competent. I'd met with Jessica and the federal agents. I'd met with Stella. I was ready. Samantha was sitting 2 rows ahead of me, next to her shark, Roman Blackwood. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. She was pale, drawn, and wouldn't look at me. Blackwood, on the other hand, was all confidence and expensive tailoring. He shuffled his papers, smiling at the court clerk. He didn't see the 2 men in dark suits enter the back of the courtroom, but I did. All rise. The court of Judge Allison Harlow is now in session. We rose. We sat. "We are here," Judge Harlow said, "on the petition to remove the executor of the Walton estate. Mr. Blackwood, your opening statement." Blackwood stood, a portrait of smug concern. "Your Honor, we are here today out of deep concern. Concern for the Walton family and concern for the executor, Mrs. Gwen Walton. My client, Mrs. Samantha Walton, will testify that her sister, in the depths of a profound and tragic grief, has become irrational," he went on, "erratic behavior, paranoia, hostility. She has," Blackwood declared, "become fixated on a bizarre fantasy of donating her son's entire $300,000 legacy to a charity, robbing her family, her niece, who is planning a wedding, of their rightful inheritance. We will prove that Mrs. Walton is not competent, that she is, in fact, a danger to the estate she is meant to protect." He sat down. The judge looked at Stella. "Ms. Mercer." Stella stood. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss all challenges to the trust fund and all petitions regarding my client's competency based on new evidence that has come to light regarding the petitioner's true motives." Blackwood shot up. "Objection! What new evidence?" "New evidence," Stella said, her voice clear and carrying, like the federal indictment of Mr. Benjamin Ashford, Jr., the petitioner's future son-in-law. The courtroom went silent. Samantha's head whipped around to look at Blackwood, her face ashen. Blackwood himself looked, for the first time, confused. "Your Honor," Blackwood stammered, The federal investigation of a third party has no bearing on my client's legitimate concerns." "Actually, it has every bearing on it," Stella cut in, smooth as silk. "Mrs. Samantha Walton's daughter, Emily, was engaged to Benjamin Ashford, Jr., who, as of this morning, is under federal indictment for charity fraud, racketeering, and money laundering. She let that hang in the air. Mrs. Walton's sudden, desperate urgency to liquidate this trust, to get her hands on this $300,000, coincides exactly with her daughter's engagement to a known financial predator." "Objection!" Blackwood roared. "Overruled!" Judge Harlow snapped, suddenly very interested. "Continue, Ms. Mercer." "We are not suggesting," Stella continued, "that Mrs. Samantha Walton was aware of Mr. Ashford's criminal activities. We are suggesting that she and her daughter were victims, that they were being manipulated by the Ashford family, who targeted them specifically to gain access to this trust fund." Samantha made a small, strangled noise. She was staring at me, her eyes wide with horror, and for the first time, dawning understanding. She had no idea. Mrs. Walton's lawsuit, Stella said, her petition to get this money, would have made it infinitely easier for the Ashfords to steal every penny intended for sick children. Blackwood was on his feet, shuffling papers frantically. Your Honor, my client was unaware. She was simply trying to ensure her daughter's future happiness. By stealing money from sick children to fund a wedding to a criminal? Stella asked, her voice filled with innocent curiosity. Objection. Sustained, Ms. Mercer. Keep your editorial comments to yourself, Judge Harlow said, but her lips twitched. Stella nodded, turning back to the judge. Mr. Blackwood has based his entire case on the idea that my client, Mrs. Gwen Walton, is irrational due to grief. He has argued that her refusal to hand this money over to her family is proof of her mental incompetence. Stella paused, then looked directly at me. And we are here today to agree with him on one point. My client's actions were unusual. They were stubborn. And they were, as it turns out, prescient. She turned back to the judge. Mr. Blackwood claims my client is irrational, but her irrational refusal to release these funds, her stubborn insistence on honoring her son's wishes, is the only reason that $300,000 is still safe. Her grief-induced mental distress, as he calls it, single-handedly protected this charitable trust from a federal fraud investigation. That doesn't sound irrational to me, Your Honor. It sounds like the only sane person in the room. She wasn't done. As for the challenge to her competency, we have a full evaluation from Dr. Penelope Monroe, declaring Mrs. Walton exceptionally competent and resilient. We also have David Walton's will, which is ironclad. Judge Harlow looked over her glasses at Blackwood. Counselor, do you have any response to these allegations? Blackwood just stood there, his mouth opening and closing. He was a shark, but he'd just been torpedoed. In that case, Judge Harlow said, her voice sharp, the challenge to Mrs. Gwen Walton's competency is summarily dismissed. Furthermore, given the extraordinary circumstances of this federal investigation, this court commends Mrs. Walton for her diligence in protecting these charitable funds from potential fraud. Case dismissed. The gavel cracked, and it was over. I walked out of the courtroom, breathing air that felt free for the first time in months. Samantha was standing by the elevators, alone. Blackwood had already disappeared. The two federal agents were talking to her, but she just looked broken. When they finished, she approached me, her steps hesitant. Gwen, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I'm sorry. I just waited. I had no idea, she said, tears welling in her eyes. About Benjamin, his family. I thought, I just wanted. I know what you wanted, Sam. Is Emily okay? She whispered. She won't take my calls. Emily's fine, I said, my voice softer than I intended. She's postponed the wedding. She's in therapy, working through the manipulation from everyone. Samantha nodded, absorbing the blow. And the money, it goes where David intended. Yes. The Children's Hospital Foundation will help hundreds of families. He would have liked that, she said. Yes, I said, he would have. We stood there in awkward, heavy silence. The first time in our adult lives we weren't fighting. Gwen, she said, about my debt, the loan, the people. I know. She looked up, shocked. You know. I know you're drowning, Sam, and I know you're scared. I thought about David. I thought about second chances. Stella Mercer, I said, knows several nonprofit organizations that are desperately in need of experienced fundraisers, people who can charm money out of wealthy donors. Her eyes widened. You'd recommend me for a job? After everything? I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. Not the greedy monster, but the frightened, desperate woman who had made a lifetime of terrible choices. David believed in second chances, I said finally. I think I can manage one. 6 months later, my life was quiet. The trust was fully established. The lawsuit was a bad memory. I was healing. I received a photo in the mail, a 4 or 6 print. It was Emily. She was on a beach, her hair blowing in the wind. She was wearing a simple white cotton dress, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. She was radiant. Standing next to her, kissing her, was a young man in a Coast Guard uniform. He was handsome and his smile was genuine. I turned the photo over, a note in Emily's handwriting. Aunt Gwen, meet my husband, Matthew. We met volunteering at the animal shelter. We had the wedding I always dreamed of. Small, meaningful, and paid for with our own money. Uncle David would have approved. Love, Emily. That evening, I drove to Eternal Meadows. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I brought fresh flowers and the new Children's Hospital newsletter. I sat down on my folding chair. Well, sweetheart, I said, smoothing the newsletter on my knee. The first David Walton Memorial Fund newsletter. I pointed to a story. This one, 37 children received medical assistance in just the last 6 months because of you. I arranged the flowers, my hand steady. Your plan worked perfectly, I whispered. The family, well, they learned some valuable lessons about greed and consequences. Samantha's actually good at her job. She's paying off her debts. Catherine and Thomas are keeping their distance. And Emily found genuine love. The wind rustled through the oak trees, a sound that no longer felt like a lonely whisper, but like an answer. Your mother didn't raise any fools, I said, packing up my chair. I love you, David. I'll see you soon. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.